What makes a good boss? Some would say those who work you a little but pay you a lot. Others favour a boss who makes you feel valued and treats you like an individual. But here at Cultaholic, we prefer a boss who takes a beating from their employees, fires people at the drop of a hat, and instead of phoning HR for an internal dispute, will put you in a tag team match or make you go one-on-one with The Undertaker, player. The WWE has a long history of authority figures. We've seen figureheads, chairmen of the board, and rattlesnakes lead the charge over the years, but who did it best? It's time to find out. In this list, we will be covering every authority figure to oversee Raw or SmackDown. There's no NXT, Nitro, or Saturday Morning Slam here. Just those red and blue brands we know and love. And unfortunately, we are only covering the people in charge, so assistants and PAs are out. Sorry, Deborah. So without any further ado, let's get going. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic.com, and this is every Raw and SmackDown authority figure ranked from worst to best. Join us. Number 29, the anonymous Raw GM. Anonymity is never a good look for a boss, but in 2010, the WWE decided to change the Raw authority figure from a former WWE superstar or backstage personality to a laptop. Each week, Raw would be constantly interrupted by the most annoying noise in the world. Again and again and again, the anonymous Raw GM would interject and Michael Cole would announce to us all, "I've just received an email from the anonymous Raw general manager." The audience never warmed to this, and generally the reaction to these emails was a sigh or a groan. However, the one saving grace on anonymity in a TV show is that eventually a reveal must take place. Who would it be? Had Michael Cole been messaging himself all day like I do on Tinder? Was Shawn Michaels making a comeback following his retirement? Perhaps the toughest SOB in the WWE was about to stomp a mud hole and walk it. Oh wait, it was Hornswoggle. Hornswoggle was the anonymous Raw GM. Number 28, Mike Adamle. Sadly, Mike Adamle was never right for the role as Raw GM. He tried his hand as an announcer and interviewer, but considering recent news about his health, Adamle just wasn't in a position to be ready for an on-air role. But the WWE seemed to confuse the audience's apathy for his work with genuine heel heat, and in 2008, the former NFL player became the general manager of Monday Night Raw. Adamle lasted all of 3 months in the role before a brief angle with Randy Orton led to his resignation. In 2017, Adamle was diagnosed with dementia, which he attributed to his years as a professional football player. We wish Mike all the best and hope he is doing well. Number 27, Donald Trump. When we launch our political YouTube channel and rank every president from worst to best, Donald Trump will be lucky to get the number 27 spot. But this is where he stands as a WWE authority figure. The Donald has always had a good relationship with the McMahons, and in 2009 he put that relationship to good use and purchased Monday Night Raw from Vinnie Mac. Trump announced that he would be creating a new commercial-free Raw, which drew disinterest from the live audience and a 7% drop in the stock price the next day. McMahon and the WWE were forced to quickly put out a statement to confirm that this purchase was a storyline-only transaction, and the very next week, Vince bought the flagship show back from the current president. But all was not lost for the Donald, as he cemented his WWE legacy by creating the guest host of Raw format, which was just brilliant. Number 26, Bret Hart. In 2010, hell froze over as Bret the Hitman Hart made his long-awaited return to the WWE to make amends with Shawn Michaels and get revenge on Vince McMahon. Following his titanic battle with McMahon at WrestleMania 26, Bret was left at a loose end. A few weeks removed from Mania, WWE United States Champion Bret Hart became the general manager of Raw. Yes, US Champion Bret Hart, remember that? Bret lasted all of 2 months in this role before becoming the latest victim of a Nexus attack and was removed from his post. Bret brought an air of respect to the role and provided a debut to the Usos. However, in 2010, Bret Hart was not a great fit for the role, and perhaps WWE would have been better giving the role to a current member of the roster. That could never go wrong. Number 25, Baron Corbin. Okay, I'm going to say it. I know Baron Corbin doesn't hold the same reverence as other members of this list and isn't warmly remembered as a great authority figure, but WWE did Corbin dirty. After winning the prestigious Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, capturing the Money in the Bank briefcase and US title run, Baron Corbin was saddled with the role of Constable of Raw. Ugh. Corbin started a reign of terror the likes of which the WWE Universe had seen time and time again. In 2018, the heel authority figure wasn't even overplayed anymore. It seemed to be a standard fixture of the show with a revolving door of individuals playing the role, like James Bond or the Pope. As Raw became more and more stale, eventually the saviors of the WWE ousted Corbin as GM and blamed him for the poor standard of Raw over the recent past. And who were these saviors? A team of babyfaces here to save the day? Perhaps the Hounds of Justice here to dish out judgment? Oh no, it was the McMahons. The actual people who create the show blamed Baron Corbin for its failure. Poor Corbin, you were a terrible general manager, but that wasn't your fault. Number 24, Brad Maddox. After his stint as an evil referee and lackey to Paul Heyman, Maddox took on the role of general manager of Raw. To be fair to Maddox, he did garner some heat during his run, but he was general manager at a time when the Authority, Vince McMahon, and the director of operations Kane all seemed to hold more power than any apparent authority figure on either brand. Maddox was undermined at every turn and wasn't anything other than a spare part in the top-heavy structure of Monday Night Raw. Maddox stayed in his role for almost a year before being relieved of his duties in the usual corporate manner, via a chokeslam from the Big Red Machine. Brad Maddox was released from his WWE contract shortly after due to insulting the audience at a live show in a manner that WWE deemed to be embarrassing. A heel insulting the audience? These are truly the end times. Number 23, Jonathan Coachman. In an alternate universe, Stone Cold Steve Austin's last ever match was against Jonathan Coachman. Just imagine the titanic battle of the bald which could have been. That was actually the creative in 2005 before Austin decided he didn't want to put over the coach. Perhaps, however, this close brush with the rattlesnake is testament to the heat that Coachman garnered as a heel authority figure. Well, actually, no, it's not. The coach went from backstage interviewer and plaything of The Rock to full-blown heel. He went on a major power trip in late 2003 and for the next 4 years battled the babyfaces of Raw, trying to gain the respect the audience would never show him. Eventually, in 2007, following a long tenure as executive assistant, Coachman became the interim GM following the death of Mr. McMahon. He held the role for all of 2 months before once more being demoted to his executive assistant position. Poor Coachman, the Dwight Schrute of Monday Night Raw. Number 22, John Laurinaitis. The man once known as Johnny Ace was introduced to the modern-day WWE audience by CM Punk in 2011, and he was introduced as a glad-handing, nonsensical douchebag yes-man. And really, that set the scene for the next year, as John Laurinaitis battled CM Punk to try and keep an aura of respect as the GM of Raw. The former senior vice president of talent operations became an advocate for people power, as he gave the audience the power to vote on Raw match types and matchups, always skewing the odds against Punk and Cena in a bid to remove any sense of good from Monday nights. After months of running the red brand into the ground with sleep-inducing promos and a voice which sounded like he'd smoked more cigarettes than the Giant in 1996, Laurinaitis set his sights on Friday nights and Team Blue. At WrestleMania 28, the former Dynamic Dudes team of Raw superstars bested Teddy Long's Blue Crew, and Johnny Ace was installed as the GM of both Raw and SmackDown. With the world at his fingertips, Laurinaitis then decided the only logical thing to do was take on his own future, sort of not really son-in-law, John Cena. If Cena could beat the president of People Power, then Laurinaitis would be fired and the wrestling world saved. But sadly, Big Match John wasn't big enough, thanks to the big right hand of the Big Show. Now that is big. Following his victory, Laurinaitis was now the premier force in WWE. He was set to be the man with all the power, but then Vince McMahon fired him anyway. Oh. Number 21, AJ Lee. The setting could not have been better for AJ Lee's coronation as Raw General Manager. On the historic, history-making 1000th episode of Raw, which would go down in history, AJ Lee was all set to marry her on-again, off-again partner Daniel Bryan. But, as this is wrestling, the wedding would of course fall to pieces. On this occasion, AJ Lee did say "I do," but not to Bryan's hand in marriage. Instead, she accepted Vince McMahon's job offer for the Raw General Manager role. The appointment seemed all set to be be a new take on the authority figure role, but instead of innovation, WWE turned AJ Lee into the same old heel authority figure. She would stack the odds against her former love interest Daniel Bryan and CM Punk before becoming involved in a storyline with John Cena. Ugh. This one had so much potential, yet AJ's talents were wasted when this should have been her coming out party. Lee lasted 3 months as the GM before being moved into a manager role for Dolph Ziggler. Poor AJ, you deserved more. Number 20, Shane McMahon. Here comes the money! Money, 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 money. You get the picture. Now, there was a time when Shane McMahon might have ranked much higher on this list. Between 1998 and 2001, Shane O'Mac played the role of on-screen authority figure, boss's son, and crazed stuntman to great effect. Shane-O was a great heel in those days, and there was a big difference between the young Shane and today's Shane. In the late 90s, Shane was one of the few characters on WWE TV most of the audience thought they could beat up. They probably couldn't, but they at least thought they could. Shane played a cowardly heel excellently, and when the time came to get his comeuppance, nobody took a better beating than Vince's son. It's hard to recall now, but when Shane returned in 2016, he was met with a reaction usually reserved for the toppest of top guys. Shane was our guy. He spoke for the fans. We trusted in Shane. And even though he came up short against The Undertaker, McMahon was still granted the chance to run Raw and eventually SmackDown. Slowly but surely, Shane became tiresome. The new Shane held his own against the top stars of WWE and battled valiantly against the odds as a babyface. Not really a role for a McMahon, is it? The crowd turned on Shane and his signature music began to be met with silence. Nowadays, Shane is one of the biggest heels across both brands, and if rumor is to be believed, may be in line to become the WWE champion at some point in the near future. Oh dear. Number 19, Booker T. Booker T is a five-time, you know how it goes, WCW champion, 2-time WWE Hall of Famer, and 1-time general manager of SmackDown. Following his WWE return at the Royal Rumble a year prior, the Book floundered around the mid-card scene before being installed as the resident boss of the Blue brand in 2012. Booker T brought a nice mix of reverence and levity to the role which hadn't been seen much before. General managers before Booker T, especially on SmackDown, fell into either the funny or fury camp. Booker, however, managed to play both sides, as his respected persona as an in-ring veteran allowed him to chop down the heels of SmackDown, whilst the light-hearted side of his personality allowed him to enjoy some more humorous moments with the babyfaces. The only issue with Booker's time as GM was the forced feud he was put into with Teddy Long about who controlled the matchmaking on SmackDown. It all felt very Game of Thrones, but without the death, sex, and dragons. Booker lasted a year in the role, which is longer than most, but ultimately it wasn't a hugely eventful reign. In fact, it's perhaps the least remembered of the various roles Booker T has played over the years. Well, maybe more so than G.I. Bro. Sucker. Number 18, Shawn Michaels. In 1998, Shawn Michaels could no longer physically compete in the ring. After years of bumps in and out of the ring, the Heartbreak Kid decided to take some time away from active competition, but WWE ensured that he did not leave our screens for long. A few months removed from his final match, the showstopper became the showmaker when he was installed as commissioner. At first, HBK played the role of a fan favorite who could battle Vince McMahon for power and control. Even though Michaels couldn't work in the ring anymore, he could hold his own with a mic with almost anyone, and from time to time we would get a glimpse of the old HBK when he would lambast the heels. Eventually, however, as all authorities must do, Michaels turned heel and aligned himself with the corporation. From here, HBK became a background player and struggled to have any impact on the show he was supposed to be in control of. Honestly, this wasn't the role for Michaels, who was always best as an underdog or someone fighting authority. He did as well as could be expected, but in retrospect, it wasn't the best work of Mr. WrestleMania's career. Thankfully, he would return to a WWE ring in 2002 and begin a new chapter of his career and life. Number 17, Paige. Paige may well have had one of the greatest debuts in WWE history, followed by a solid run at the top of the Divas division which set the course for the women's revolution. Sadly, however, Paige may have also had one of the most heartbreaking ends to an in-ring career. Following a return to the ring from a hiatus in 2017, Paige was injured just a mere month into her return and forced to retire from in-ring competition. Although Paige was unable to compete against the new breed of women's superstars, she was given a star starring role as the new general manager of SmackDown alongside Commissioner Shane McMahon. Paige certainly had an air of authority and, believe it or not, managed to remain a babyface for the entirety of her tenure. She could punish wrongdoers and reward the heroes with matches and stipulations that were just and fair. And even better, Paige seemed to genuinely enjoy her new role and was a huge advocate for all things SmackDown on social media. She maybe did struggle with the standard WWE 20-minute opening promo, but her backstage segments and aura held up. Eventually, the McMahons did away with the GM role, and Paige later re-emerged as a manager for the Kabuki Warriors, not that you would know because they're never on pissing TV. But all in all, Paige was a solid GM and held her own in a role she was never really supposed to do. Number 16, Daniel Bryan. For the man who defied leadership for the hottest period of his career, obviously the next step was for Daniel Bryan to become an authority figure on screen. But as much as it didn't really make sense, SmackDown was fantastic in 2016, and that was often down to the on-screen work of the GM. From his hot entrance to his vastly improved mic work, the former American Dragon was a premier part of the Blue brand. Bryan had some excellent moments as GM, but perhaps none better than his work on Talking Smack. Bring it back, WWE, please bring it back. On the SmackDown post-show, Bryan could relax and talk as himself, poking fun at his Raw rivals and discussing his desire to get back in the ring. Talking Smack also brought about the best moment of Bryan's tenure as GM. The Miz entered the set, and before long the two were locked in looked to be a very real and heated argument, which even saw Bryan storm off. Overall, he proved to be a worthy addition to an already hot show, even if he couldn't wrestle at the time. Number 15, Stephanie McMahon. If your surname is McMahon, the only real role for you in the company is as a dominating authority figure, and perhaps no other McMahon has been able to hold down this role without getting much of a comeuppance for as long as Stephanie. Vince's baby girl has played the on-screen authority figure on and off since 1999. That's 20 long years as a figurehead of both Raw and SmackDown. Stephanie's best turn as an authority figure came about as part of the McMahon-Helmsley era in late 2000. Together with Triple H, before they were shoot married, but after they were work married, she dominated the landscape as one of the biggest heels in the company. Stephanie would find herself the butt of the joke many times, but usually came out on top. She and Triple H were so detestable in this time, it really did force the crowd to get behind whoever was opposing them, be that The Rock, Mankind, or even her own mother. In later years, the billion-dollar princess seemed to catch the same disease currently plaguing her older brother Shane as she became untouchable. She would demean and belittle WWE superstars without any real comeuppance coming her way. This was never more prevalent than in 2014 when Brie Bella came to the aid of Daniel Bryan and managed to get a match against Stephanie. It meant that someone could finally teach her a lesson, right? Stephanie beat Brie at SummerSlam with the pedigree, and of course Bella never got a rematch. But hey, at least Ronda Rousey made her tap out at WrestleMania. Number 14, Sgt Slaughter. Before Sgt Slaughter became the commissioner in 1997, authority figures had not been as prevalent on TV as they would become. Before Slaughter, the authority figures of yesteryear would only really be shown on screen when they were signing a big matchup, or perhaps laying down the law on an unruly heel. But when the Sarge became commissioner in 1997, he became a weekly staple of WWE television. Slaughter's time as commissioner is probably best remembered for his interactions with DX. DX would constantly undermine Slaughter, and even when he seemed to have got one up on the degenerates by forcing them to compete against each other, they found yet another way to embarrass the military man. Eventually, Slaughter stood about all he could stand, and he challenged Triple H to a boot camp match. Of course, he came up short, but it was fun while it lasted. Sarge will be remembered for many moments through his wrestling career, and his role as commissioner is a definite highlight. Solid work, sir. At ease. Number 13, Gorilla Monsoon. If you have an area of every arena in the world named after you, you clearly earned respect. And Gorilla Monsoon, above all else, was respected by each and every wrestler, promoter, and fan in the industry. This meant he was an ideal candidate to be WWF's figurehead leader in the mid-90s. Monsoon would appear on screen as the president of the company in some of the Fed's biggest moments. He was there for the main event of WrestleMania 12 and always seemed to be in the background of the big moments of the new generation era. Monsoon also laid his body on the line at almost 60 years of age when a debuting Vader crushed him with the Vader Bomb. In his later years, Gorilla's appearances became more and more sporadic, but before his health declined to the point that he could no longer appear on weekly TV, he did share a screen with a certain Rattlesnake. If you've never seen the segments, go back and watch them to see perhaps Gorilla's last great moments on WWE WWF TV. His role as president was the last time the WWE used this moniker, and it's fitting that he was the final on-air president of the company. Number 12, Jack Tunney. At the height of Hulkamania and the mid-80s WWF boom, only one man was seen by the viewing audience as the chief of staff, and that was Canada's own Jack Tunney. Tunney was president for many major milestones through the late 80s and early 90s, and announced the main event of many WrestleManias. When Monday Night Raw launched in 1993, it did so with Jack Tunney at its head as the on-screen authority. Tunney wouldn't start episodes of Raw with 20-minute promos or get beaten down by monster heels, but he always brought an air of importance, as he would only appear when absolutely necessary. Tunney would only actually appear on Raw a handful of times, but his impact was felt when he did. He would oversee the coin toss in 1994, which decided who would challenge Yokozuna first at WrestleMania 10. Tunney's place in history cannot be forgotten, as he held down the role of an on-screen authority figure for longer than any other person not named McMahon. Tunney was the perfect neutral president, and in understated fashion really did define what authority and leadership should look like. Number 11, Triple H. Triple H has been both a locker room leader and a backstage official for a number of years now, but it was only in 2011 that he was announced on screen as being the head honcho of WWE when he removed Vince McMahon from his post on behalf of the board of directors. Not long after this, Triple H was announced as the new COO of WWE, and he began his on-screen career as an authority figure. At first, Hunter continued to portray the babyface character he'd been for some time up until this point, but it just didn't feel right. Triple H is a babyface? Okay. Triple H is an authority figure? Fair enough. Triple H is a babyface and authority figure? That felt kinda wrong. He beat up Curtis Axel and got beat up by Brock Lesnar, but the audience never really cared. Eventually, as all authority figures in WWE must do, the game turned heel, but this was different. Triple H as a heel breathed new life into his character. He was fantastic as the powerful boss who'd been there and done that because, well, he had. In Daniel Bryan, he had the perfect underdog foil to constantly belittle and batter until eventually Triple H got his just desserts at WrestleMania 30. Triple H would put this loss behind him quite quickly as he continued to be one of the top heels on Raw, while also putting over the new generation of faces such as Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and even Ronda Rousey. On top of the Cerebral Assassin's great heel work on the main stage, he would also appear on NXT as a face. Even though on the surface that may seem confusing, it made perfect sense to the hardcore audience who watch and enjoy NXT's presentation. NXT's audience know its success is in large part down to Triple H's guidance and direction, and to try to force them to boo him simply wouldn't work. The way Hunter can flip-flop between backstage official, on-screen authority figure, and in-ring general is a testament to the abilities of the man who doesn't just take part in the game, he is the bloody game. Number 10, Steve Austin. Following Stone Cold's forced early retirement in 2003, the Texas Rattlesnake was forced to shed his wrestling skin. But thankfully under that layer of skin was another layer of skin, but this skin was the skin of a co-general. I'm gonna stop this now. Steve Austin was as good on the mic as he was in the ring, and seeing as though he can no longer compete, Austin used his charisma to provide Monday nights with a flavor of Texas each and every week. Austin was installed as the co-general manager of Raw alongside Eric Bischoff, and the two formed an excellent double act which became the highlight of many episodes of Raw throughout 2003. Austin would also dole out stunners to the mid-card heels of the day, careful to never be drawn into a scuffle with the main eventer, and would usually conclude episodes of Raw with a toast for the audience. Austin's time as co-GM would last for less than a year, and his stint as a sheriff which followed lasted even less time. But that was really the only drawback when you look back on Austin's time as a top man on Raw. He was funny, intense, and over as ever. It was a shame it ended when it did, but at least it gave Austin a chance to add another string to his already huge bow. He proved he could lay some great creative snake eggs from his rattlesnake body in the form of promos and beer bashes and I've just started doing that metaphor again. Number 9, Ric Flair. The episode of Raw which followed the 2001 Survivor Series is one of the most eventful in the history of the flagship show. Paul Heyman was fired, the Vince McMahon Kiss My Ass Club was created, Jerry Lawler returned, and the Consortium was revealed. In his hometown of Charlotte, North Carolina, the Nature Boy was revealed as the man who'd purchased 50% of the WWF. Vince's reaction was fantastic. The crowd were on fire, and the 16-time world champion became part owner of the World Wrestling Federation. Flair was the exact opposite of McMahon, which made their partnership all the more entertaining. Where McMahon would scheme and plot, Flair would be open and announce plans to the audience. When McMahon tried to give the upper hand to the heels of the show, Flair would even the odds for the good and the great of the roster. Only a few months into his new role, Flair took on The Undertaker in a bloody match at WrestleMania 18, one which was better than it had any right to be. Eventually, the joint ownership became too much for McMahon, and he took control of SmackDown, leaving the dirtiest player in the game in charge of Monday nights. Around this time, Flair became more active in ring and became involved in a feud with Stone Cold Steve Austin. The two even competed in a dream match in June 2002 on an episode of Raw. Flair had proved that he was as bombastic on the mic as he ever was, and his promo work could go from insane to intense to inaudible at any moment. One thing was for sure, Ric Flair was must-see TV at this time. The Nature Boy really refound the spark he'd been missing in the final years of WCW, to the point that it rejuvenated his career on a WWF stage. Number 8. Kurt Angle. Nobody picked up the art of pro wrestling to a main event standard quicker than the 1996 Olympic gold medalist. And when Angle had to take some time away from the ring to heal a broken neck, he picked up the role of GM just as quickly. Angle was chosen to lead SmackDown in 2004 and was an absolute breath of fresh air. The Olympian, who had a kayfabe broken leg, would wheel himself out onto the ramp and be met with a shower of boos before he could even lift the mic. Angle was feuding with Vickie Guerrero at the time of his appointment, and he stuck his Olympic nose where it wasn't wanted to ensure that Guerrero would lose his WWE title to JBL. Following the robbery of the championship from Latino Heat, Angle's worked leg injury was revealed to be, well, a work, and Vince McMahon fired him as SmackDown GM. But Kurt Angle as general manager wasn't done there, not by a long shot. In 2017, Kurt made his return to WWE to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, and then 3 nights later on the Raw after Mania, he was installed once more as GM, this time for the Red brand. Angle was deeply involved with major storylines on Raw whilst GM, from revealing himself as Jason Jordan's dad to looking like the Shield's actual dad. And even though he wasn't the same Angle in the ring, outside of it he was still full of intensity, integrity, and intelligence. In Kurt's last big angle as Raw GM, he teamed with fellow elite athlete Ronda Rousey against the ever-present power couple of Stephanie McMahon and Triple H. Together, they put on perhaps the most entertaining match of WrestleMania 34, with Kurt helping Ronda to an incredible debut victory. All in all, Angle had 2 solid runs as GM, and I'm sure he'll look back on them as warmly as he does his gold medal, Hall of Fame ring, and many title reigns. Well, almost as warmly. Number 7. Mick Foley. Most people would say that there are 3 faces of Foley: Mankind, Cactus Jack, and Dude Love, but the educated amongst us are aware that there are really 4 faces of the man from Long Island, and the 4th might just be his most entertaining of the lot: Mick Foley, Commissioner. Following Foley's first retirement at WrestleMania 2000, he took a brief hiatus from wrestling to work on his second book, but before long he received the call to rejoin Vince & Co. as an authority figure. In this position, Mick really got the chance to shine and show his comedic chops. His backstage work with Edge, Christian, and Kurt Angle always stood out as a highlight, as did his ever-shifting office backstage. Sometimes he'd be in a boiler room, other times on a golf cart. It was lovely. Foley was a steadfast babyface during his run as commissioner and proved to be an effective counterpart to the heel-heavy roster of the early 2000s. He led the investigation into Stone Cold's hit and run, and even scored a verbal SmackDown win over The Rock when he finally managed to steal the Great One's "It doesn't matter" catchphrase. Foley as the commissioner was excellent, and it's a time of his career where he got to have fun and was never really demeaned on camera. And then he did it again. Foley's second run as an authority figure isn't as fondly remembered as his first. In 2016, when the brands resplit, Foley was given the title of Raw GM, but this time he would not be working alone. Foley stood alongside the new Raw Commissioner, Stephanie McMahon. In the early stages of their work, the two did seem to get along and even showed chemistry at times, but McMahon slid effortlessly back into her heel persona, and Foley, for all intents and purposes, appeared to be her assistant. Eventually, McMahon's domination of Foley became too much, and when she tried to force him to fire a member of the Raw roster, he chose the billion-dollar princess herself, leading to the end of a disappointing second tenure. However, for his fondly remembered first run, and for managing to keep pace with modern-day WWE for a year, we tip our hat to Commissioner Foley. Number 6. Paul Heyman. It's clear from the way that ECW died that Paul Heyman's strength probably isn't being the top guy running a wrestling business. But on screen, now we're talking. And talking is what Paul Heyman does. He does it better than 99% of the wrestling world and can draw support, heat, and money with his mic skills. After Vince McMahon beat his own daughter in a no DQ match, oh Vince, what are you like, Paul Heyman was announced as the new general manager of SmackDown. Heyman played the role of heel authority figure to perfection, injecting life into storylines regardless of their quality. He aligned himself with the Dudley Boys in a battle to win The Undertaker to his cause, one which would see Paul Bearer be buried in cement. He also reformed his connection to Brock Lesnar, and no one can hype the beast like the Advocate can. But the biggest feather in Heyman's cap during this era was just the overall quality of SmackDown. The SmackDown 6, Undertaker, Brock Lesnar, and an emerging John Cena. This year of SmackDown, with Heyman at the helm both on and off screen, may well be the best 12 months in the Blue Brand's history. It was a true high point of Heyman's long career. Now, let's hope he can do the same for Monday Night Raw. Number 5, William Regal. If you look up the word villain in a dictionary, you'll likely see a picture of William Regal, which is a bit strange because who's been making all of these illustrated dictionaries? Regal had been a heel for the majority of his WWE career, and as his character was a pompous, arrogant Brit, it made perfect sense for him to be an authority figure. Regal was first named as WWF Commissioner in 2001 and quickly found his feet, feuding with Chris Jericho and forming a comedic partnership with Tajiri. The audience in turn grew to admire Regal, and when the Alliance invaded the WWF, Regal became a no-nonsense figurehead of McMahon's company. Of course, however, the Commissioner again turned heel and aligned himself with Stephanie and Shane. This led to the ultimate indignity, as once the war was over, he was forced to become the first member of Vince McMahon's Kiss My Ass Club. Regal's first run as an authority figure is seen as his best turn in this role, but his second run should not be overlooked. In 2008, Regal had a brief run as Raw General Manager and enjoyed a career renaissance feuding with CM Punk, Mr. Kennedy, and Triple H. This Regal was different from his earlier stint as Commissioner. As Raw GM, he was vicious, nasty, and a legitimate threat to the babyfaces of Raw. Sadly, however, this run would be short-lived due to a wellness violation. Perhaps no other authority figure has had separate runs which have been so different, yet both excellent. Also, he could draw heat like no one else. Well, maybe there was someone else. Number 4, Vickie Guerrero. One of the signs that you are very good at your job is that you could make the crowd react to the simplest phrases. Phrases like yes, what, and even excuse me. Guerrero's heel character came out of nowhere. Up to this point, Vickie had only really been known as Eddie's wife, and her brief appearances on screen hadn't showcased her heelish talents. In 2007, Vickie was named as the general manager of SmackDown, and it was also revealed that she was entwined in a romantic relationship with the brand's top heel, Edge. Nobody could have predicted it, but the rated R superstar and Guerrero had incredible chemistry. Vickie helped Edge in his battles against Batista, Rey Mysterio, and The Undertaker. She would interfere and even take bumps, all to keep the big gold belt around the waist of her new love. The act of Edge and Vickie was so hot, they were eventually moved to the flagship brand before Edge lost the world title at WrestleMania 25. Now Guerrero was the general manager of Raw, which was a testament to the quality of her performance. Considering she was never really supposed to be an on-screen character, Vickie had now ascended to a role usually reserved for the biggest stars of the day, and no one could deny that she deserved it. Guerrero would bounce back and forth between SmackDown and Raw in a variety of roles until her departure in 2014. She was never supposed to be the character she became, but through hard work, determination, and the X Factor she clearly held in abundance, she became one of the greatest authority figures in WWE history, adding to the already stellar legacy of the great Guerrero name. Number 3, Teddy Long. Now hold up for a second, player. For many years, Theodore Long was the first name that came to mind when people mentioned general manager. From 2004 to 2012, Long was the authority on SmackDown, and his legacy is clear. Teddy has now gained cult status amongst wrestling fans as a constant and steady presence. In the come and go of the wrestling world, Long stood tall as one of the few people who kept their authority role without wavering or changing track. Well, not much anyway. Obviously, Teddy also also had to be involved in some ludicrous storylines as per the GM mandate. He had a heart attack, fell into a coma, and was kidnapped by The Undertaker, but he and the dead man would make amends, as Long would serve up many superstars to go one-on-one with him on what seemed like a weekly basis. Long also created more random tag matches than WWE Universe mode, but did so with such enthusiasm we couldn't help but be excited to see Edge and Chavo Guerrero take on Kane and the Great Khali. Teddy was honoured in 2017 by being inducted into the Hall of Fame, in no small part due to his work as an authority figure. He's probably the best babyface GM of all time, and for that, Teddy, we award you with number 3 on this list. And if you'd like to set up a tag match between the Cultaholic lads, give us a call. Number 2, Eric Bischoff. In 1996, if you'd have told Eric Bischoff he was going to work for Vince McMahon, he'd probably think you were out of your mind. But in 2002, that's exactly what happened, when Eazy-E was revealed to be the new general manager of Raw. Bischoff's early year in the role of GM centered around innovation. He brought about the Raw Roulette, Taboo Tuesday, and most famously, the Elimination Chamber. Bischoff was always a great talker, but this ability seemed to grow week on week during his WWE days. He was also, of course, a heat-drawing magnet. His every word was met with a trumpet of boos, and he responded each time with the smuggest of smiles. The former head of WCW wasn't scared to get his hands dirty either. He would take a beating from many a Raw babyface, boosting their popularity in the process. Eventually, it came time for Eric to leave the position he'd made his own, and in doing so, he may have had the greatest exit of any authority figure. For his misdeeds and mismanagement, Bischoff was placed on trial, and with Judge McMahon in charge of proceedings, there was only ever going to be one outcome. Vince spoke the 2 magic words to Eric, John Cena deposited the Bish in the back of a dump truck. A perfect ending for a near-perfect run as an authority figure on Raw. Number 1, Vince McMahon. No one ever really had a hope of beating Vinnie Mac to the top spot, did they? In fact, you might say they had no chance. No chance in never mind. Although Vince has owned the WWE since the mid-80s, it was only in 1997 that he was revealed as the puppet master who'd been pulling the strings all this time. With the WWF seemingly fighting a losing battle against WCW, McMahon would become a vital cog in the Attitude Era machine. Vince showed great instincts with his timing and ability to keep a crowd hooked on his every word. Yes, sometimes he was over the top and slightly hokey, but you can't deny that it led to a collection of iconic moments. And of course, the most iconic of these came opposite Stone Cold, portraying the boss from hell who finally got his comeuppance. But Vince didn't just have chemistry with the brass Texan. It's easy to forget that he also did fantastic work with the likes of Mick Foley, The Undertaker, Shane McMahon, and even his own son, Triple H. Vince took verbal beatdowns from his opponents and the crowd, and when the time came to get physical, Vince would take horrendous bumps, graphic blade jobs, and the occasional awful stunner in order to get others over. He truly would do anything in the name of entertainment. So there you have it. Number 1 is Vince McMahon, an evil boss, a billionaire, a businessman, and the greatest authority figure of all time. Thanks for watching. Let us know what you think in the comments down below. You can follow us on Twitter at Cultaholic. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. If you enjoy what we do here at Cultaholic, you can pledge to us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Cultaholic. And most importantly, don't forget to hit subscribe and join us.